All right. Should we shall we move on then to our other
Another
potential
series. Let's go.
D or potentially new lower ranking build king? King, you want to start us off?
Gladly. Alright, for a series with build in the name, their world building sure is fucking ass, I mean. Oh boy. I don't even know where to start with this series. Is this still being published?
Yeah, it
I
is.
think so.
I mean, it's not even at 10 chapters yet. Like, so
Ah,
it's not at
uh,
that point where it can be canceled yet,
I,
unless
I
like
don't
the
need
author
10
does something
chapters.
awful.
I don't, you don't even need 10 chapters. I read the first and God damn it. I mean, with Build King, okay, like it's in the name, they build, but they can't build the world. Simple as that. D tier. Let's get this one over with.
All right. Tay, how about you?
Like Bill King was one chapter was enough for me. Like the what I saw in that chapter, especially with like the creatures in the world that they built, it feels like some kind of like love letter to Super Mario, but in a really poor taste. That's like all the creatures and the whole premise. It's just so wacky. It's too wacky for its own good. I feel the world building didn't like the world building was supposed to be its saving grace, and it just wasn't. So it's definitely a D tier for me.
All right, Sean, how about you?
So, for me, I've read every chapter of Build King so far. Um, I think that
How?
normally, yeah, it was a struggle, but
I've also read all of it, so I know where you're going.
yeah. So normally, when you start a series out, I'd say even though there's only not too many chapters yet, in most other series, you get a decent understanding of what the world's like, and in general, I think everything looks cool. Like aesthetically, it's pleasing, but beyond that, there's really not a lot of substance. And besides just that, this is one thing, maybe you guys feel differently, but I just think the intro, the very first page of the manga just made me want to drop it. It's so cringy. Like they're trying to be super dramatic about something that doesn't matter. Like the introduction is them saying behind every one of these buildings is a builder. No one cares. That's all I have to say about that. No one we know that someone had to build every building that exists, but beyond that, I would put it in D tier.
That's fair. That's fair. I would also put it in D tier. And as someone that has read all of Toriko, which is hands down a much better series than Build King, Build King is literally a Toriko clone, but way worse. Like, way worse. Like, at least in Toriko's, like, in favor of it, like, it had way cooler main characters in Toriko compared to what we have for Build King. And not that the characters should necessarily matter on the world building side of things, but the fact that we've got such a carbon copy but worse version of Toriko, no, it's bad. Boruto at least tries. Build King, it does not. So I would definitely put it in D tier as well. Ronan, how about you? Do you want to finish off this
Ah,
roast of
yeah, yeah,
Build
yeah,
King?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So listen, I would hate to assess a series without doing my due diligence, right? So I forced myself to read Build King, right? It was painful. It was like stabbing myself in my brain because of how painful it was. And me being slightly hyperbolic aside, here is why I think systematically its world building does not work, right? For one, right, in order to be interested in the world, you need to be partially interested in the characters that occupy it. We're not, first off, right? The premise in and of itself, while technically unique, is not interesting, right? It's not intriguing, which is fine. You can make premises that are not inherently good by your writing, right? For example, I don't care about volleyball, I love Haikyuu to death, right? Haikyuu made me care about a sport that I had never once thought of. Build King is not able to do a similar thing with building. It's boring. It comes off as boring. And that leads me to my third thing. I don't want to come off as like a meathead who can't read a lot, right? Like I've read late Hunter x Hunter where there are complete pages and pages of exposition off the wall. But there's something about Build King that is so boring with how much text. Like it's like the text to interesting actual thing happening is like 100 to 1, right? For every 100 bubbles of dialogue I see, I get about one nugget of something that interests me in the slightest, right? And even that, I may be giving Build King a little too much credit, right? The world is just so dry, right? We get it. You build. Now expand on that. What is interesting about your story besides the fact that you build things, right? I understand that's your core premise and that's okay, but it doesn't build around that, ironically enough, in an interesting way, in a funny way. Like I understand the sentiment that is really goofy, and it is, but it's not funny. It's not intriguing. It's not engaging. And if the first chapter, right? Usually I'm pretty understanding of first chapters. I'm like, you're just getting started. I get it. But if the first chapter not only made me want to just not read it immediately, but completely drop it and never read it unless I'm actually doing it for the sake of a video, I feel like that's very indicative of the quality of your writing. Take this all with a grain of salt, right? Build King has just started. Maybe miraculously from chapter 9 on, if the series even continues, it'll be great, right? In fact, I hope it's great. I never hope that a manga does bad or sucks, right? I enjoy reading good stuff. Build King, however, I did not enjoy. It to sum it all up, right? You could say structurally it works very poorly, and that is understandable. But from a core standpoint, from the deepest part of my soul, I found it terribly boring and actually annoying to read.
Yeah, I think that sums it up really well.
Before we move on, I like to share some Build King facts with you all. I like to do my research when it comes to certain series. So, as before we were preparing for this, I looked up some Build King facts. Right, number one, there are more Sakura fans than there are Build King.
Ooh,
That's a nice
ooh,
statistic.
that's a low number right there.
Hey, did you also know there are more people that think Boruto is better than Naruto than there are people who think Build King was interesting? That's actually a
That's
scientific fact.
Yeah.
And there's only
uh,
about 10 of them as well.
all right. And here's another one. According on if we go on BuzzFeed, top 10 tips to help you fall asleep. Reading Build King ranks number one. Fascinating. That's
Are you
that's
sure
cool.
that
That's
didn't
cool.
rank number one in putting you into a coma? Because I think that's gonna be a stronger reaction for Build King. So
Oh
You know
boy.
what the
yeah.
worst thing is the fact that we're all trashing this, but like the Toriko stands are probably gonna go hard at it. It's gonna end up running for like 50
Ooh,
plus chapters.
let me
So like the
speak on that
17 Toriko
real,
fans.
real quick. One thing I want to say: if you have to defend your series by saying one of two things, right? I get it. I understand not every series can jump off right at the gate and be amazing from the start. I get it. I'm understanding. I'm sympathetic. But if you have to tell me to wait, really 30 plus chapters is like where I start to draw the line, right? And I feel like I'm on the nicer end of the spectrum. If there is no promise that far, it's bad. And if you, this is actually something someone commented under one of my videos for when I talked about it. If you have to say, right, that it's good if you read Toriko, I don't care. I don't care if your manga is good if I have to read another manga. Like I'm not trying to do background research on the mangaka before I read a new series. It's just a manga has to be able to stand on its own in the world building aspect, especially for a series that is so heavily built. I keep finding myself saying Build King puns built upon just the world building. Like Build King is easily interpreted as a series that is heavily reliant on that. And for it to suck at a fundamental level at that is just really disappointing.
But that's the thing. Like, you shouldn't have to say that, oh, if you're a Toriko fan, you'll like it. Because if you're a Toriko fan, you should be disappointed that it's such a lackluster carbon copy of Toriko. That is not a good argument. Like, No, that's like the farthest thing. Like Toriko fans should not be happy that like this is what we get next. Like, don't get me wrong, compared to even more of this author's content, this is still better than them. But even then, like, no,